This is Ahead in Tech, career journeys of extraordinary people in tech and interviews that help you get ahead in your tech career. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Season 2 of Ahead in Tech after a little short break. Welcome back to all of my old fans and new audience. Today I'm joined by Gilles Guegan. Gilles, bonjour. How are you?
Bonjour. Very well. How are you, Sanjay?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm good. Like we were discussing just before we started recording. I've now moved back to London for a little while. I'm going to be here for a little bit. I'm not sure what long-term plans are, but I'm here now. So, little introduction to you, Gilles. Some things you may or may not know about yourself. So, you have something like 15 or 20 years as a dev in the industry, something like that.
Yeah, about 15 years, I would say.
Mostly sort of front-endy kind of stuff. You know, you've had some cool gigs at places like the train line, and you spent a considerable amount of time, at City University, where you were tech lead. You were a big part of their web
Yeah.
development team there. And then you also founded some of the JavaScript courses there.
The introduction course, which I wrote and sort of taught, and then the advanced course as well, which I wrote initially, taught a little bit, and then passed it on to someone else.
And most recently, your title is front-end developer at a company called Credit Benchmark. You've been there like 4 or 5 years now, but really, that title doesn't do you justice. So we're going to be focusing a lot on your time there as well.
Yeah, we can talk about titles and yeah.
And Credit Benchmark, this is an interesting company. It's like a B2B kind of model. It's credit risk analysis for other sort of big lenders and or financial institutions. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So we just take it's quite a niche, very niche thing, but we take sort of credit ratings from banks who are contributors, sort of average that out, and then sell it back essentially to sort of subscribers, who can be anyone, could be the bank themselves or hedge funds or any financial institution really, who finds that kind of stuff interesting.
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept in this sort of fintech space, and I mean, it works, right? It's like you're aggregating all this risk data and providing meaningful analysis on it, right? And it works, and I guess you slowly by slowly you're onboarding more and more organizations, right?
Yeah, I think it's a sorry, it's a really slow process because traditionally I think banks are quite slow movers, sometimes, and I think the kind of data that we're sort of requesting from them or getting from them is very extremely confidential. It's kind of their little baby stuff, and so they're very reluctant to let it go, and what usage it gets and then who it gets sold to. So I think that they're very cautious about that. So it's taken a lot of time, but that's I think that was kind of known from the start. So it's a slow process, but it's getting there. It's
Yeah.
getting there.
And from a technical point of view, because you hired me, I worked with you on your team there for maybe only a few months, I think. But it's a very cool project, right? Lots of amazing, really fun front end work to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the data in a way is almost a bit boring, unless you're really into financial stuff. But the tech around it is quite interesting because we've got all this data, and so it starts with cleaning it up, sort of normalizing it, and then kind of categorizing it and classifying it. So there's a lot of data manipulation, which is really interesting. And we're talking millions and millions of rows, which is not massive, but it's decent. So there's all that side, and then there's sort of getting that data, storing it in a meaningful way, and then building APIs to sort of expose all of that because we build all our APIs in house. Um, and then those APIs power sort of our front end products, which are file outputs and the front end web app, which you were working on, which I'm working on, and even we've got an Excel add-in, etc. So it's almost end to end really. There's no sort of plugins that we've used for any of this. We build everything ourselves. Yeah, and the product on the front end is really interesting because we're displaying data. There's lots of data. There's lots of sort of ways we could display or ways we could engage the users and the clients who use the application. So I think from a front end point of view, yeah, there's loads of stuff. There's tables, there's graphs, there's numbers left and right. There's
Yeah,
reference
yeah.
data, there's all that stuff, which is yeah. There's a bit of everything. which is quite
Yeah,
interesting.
I remember. I mean, I remember being introduced to all sorts of graph types that I'd never even heard of before, and I was like,
Yeah,
"Wow, okay, now we got to build things we didn't even know existed."
yeah. The what's interesting about that as well is that and I think this is where you came in. You know, we've got a fairly basic product that we've been building for the last few years in terms of web app, which is what it is. It's not perfect; it's getting there, but it's what it is. But there is so much cool stuff that we could be doing, and I think that's where we struggle a little bit as well as a company. Is like, okay, well, there is lots of really cool graph and lots of cool stuff. There is lots of really cool stories that we could be telling to the users, based on those numbers. Because those numbers really do tell a story. We've got a credit rating for companies, and it goes up and it goes down, and it really, you can start to aggregate all of that, and it tells you a story about a specific industry. COVID was really interesting because our numbers show that something is happening. The travel industry, for example, we've seen the numbers go down massively, and the ratings go down for all the sort of players in that sector. So we could really tell a story, and it's how do you translate that to a web application while also giving people the information they do need, the sort of low level. So there is a lot of cool stuff, but we kind of struggle with that in a way because we could go in a million directions, and it's like, where do we focus? We've only got a couple of devs. Where do we focus our time and effort? So it's quite, but that's kind of where you came in at the time when we were building. We were calling it CB2, sort of this next version of the application, and sort of where does that go? Um, so yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I really enjoyed my time there, and it felt like we were just about to breach the threshold of doing some really interesting stuff. And then I guess funding kind of got pulled from that, kind of the story of a small scale a startup at the time or scale up at the time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think life gets in the way, and at some point, the company founders, which are very close, it's quite good as well because we've got the two company founders work with us essentially, and at the minute, the one of them is acting as CEO, and at some point, real life kicks in, and it's like, okay, well, we also need to make money at some point, so we had to. It's kind of that wave of, okay, well, let's hire a bunch of people, let's hire contractors, let's do this project, and at some point, it's like, okay, hang on, we need to pay our rent, we need to do this, we need to pay our current staff, etc. And it's like, okay, well, that project is going to have to be put on hold for a bit. Which, some of the points that you were saying before we started this was sort of how does life work at a small startup, and it's a bit that there's a bit of, well, it's not always perfect, and it's not always rainbows and etc. And sometimes life kind of kicks in, but I
Yeah,
think that's part of the fun in a way.
absolutely. It's part of the challenge, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but anyway, we're maybe jumping ahead of ourselves a little. Let's go
Sorry,
back.
yeah. If you
No,
want
no.
to ramble on, Angie, I will ramble on. So just stop me.
That's great. That's why I want you here. I'm really happy that you're actually my first guest for season two.
Yeah,
I've
good.
been
So
looking
I'm
forward to this,
really
man.
happy to be here as well.
Awesome. Because I know we've been trying to make this work for quite a while now, maybe a couple of
Yeah,
months.
there was a few pushback.
Yeah. But so anyway, City University, you spent some time there. You helped build the web team there. You were a tech lead there, and then and then you founded this JavaScript course there. Which now, in a sense, to me anyway, you're a bit of a mini celebrity because I mean, a lot of a lot of London devs will know this course. It's a very popular course. It's very small. It's very niche, but a lot of people will suggest you go through it. And a lot of devs I've worked with have gone through that course at some point. It's like a small part time evening course once a week for like 10 weeks or something, and it just kind of reinforces the fundamentals and all that, right? So where tell me the
Yeah.
story about that. Where does the idea come from? How do you kick it off?
So to start with, this is all very new to me. I didn't realize this had a bit of an underground reputation in the dev world.
Oh yeah.
So this is all very new to me. But City University is a very interesting, I think, to me, place. It's interesting because the I think, when did I join? 2012, I think. I joined the team there, and obviously I didn't join as a lead. I started as a sort of regular front end dev. Um, the team was really interesting there. The guys have moved on now, mainly, but it was mainly interesting because the main developer there was a designer initially. So he had a very, very good eye for design, and his designs were really good, like very kind of new stuff. Some of the stuff you'd see in like 10 years ago that were quite nice and quite cool. Um, it just so happens that he was also a very good front end developer, like very, very good front end dev, just a very good all rounder. And it's quite hard to get that skill, have a designer and a front end dev that are very, very good. It does happen, but it's quite rare. Um, and he was also very keen on accessibility and sort of usability on top of that, which made it even a sort of stronger lead. Um, and what was interesting about City as well is that we had a UX straight away, sort of a full-time UX role as well in the team, which, I think 10 years ago I'm not saying it was rare, but I think specifically for a university team, it wasn't necessarily that common at the time. So the guys were doing some really great stuff. And so I kind of joined in the middle of that right after they redesigned the entire website, went through an entire sort of redesign, which was carried out quite well, I suppose, or delivered a fairly good product. And it was sort of joining that and then building on top of that because, once a website is built, there's always work to do. And so we had this model of like, front end, UX, usability. There was a couple of devs, a couple of back end devs as well. So it was very interesting stuff. I learned really, really so much from the guys there. Doing user research with users and setting up user research sessions on the website, using students because obviously we had a massive pool of students. So at a university, it's quite easy to find sort of lab rats to be able to test your product. So yeah, it was like, I think at the time it was exactly what I needed. Learned so much. And then the main dev guy moved on after I think a couple of years. So obviously there was an opening for that role. So I took that on and sort of became the sort of main dev lead there. And I think after I took on that role, I hired two or three other devs, sort of rolling people, come in and leaving and stuff. But yeah, so there was did a lot there as a sort of tech lead as well. Um, so that was the experience there, which brought quite a bit. And then on the side of that, so the university city runs short courses, which are sort of geared towards adults or young adults, which are evening courses, and the choice of courses is quite varied. There's a wide range. So there's a lot of IT courses. There's a lot of marketing courses, financial courses, like there's creative writing, there's quite a lot there. And I think the IT courses was already quite strong. There was quite a few things, but the sort of front end world was sort of missing. I think there was a HTML course, a HTML CSS course, but there was no JavaScript course, which if you think about it is, right now is kind of the hot topic. So that was kind of missing. And yeah, I think it just happened that I knew the guy who was running those courses, from sort of managing that at the university. We just had a quick chat one day and he was like, well, we're thinking about putting a course like that. It's quite, we don't have anything. It's quite a hot topic. We want to do something. Are you interested? Obviously, he knew me from working internally. So it kind of grew organically. It just happened because it just worked. So took quite a bit of time to write that course. I have to say that I think I suppose the first few courses were probably not as I don't know, not as successful maybe was as maybe
Mhm.
what's the word, as impactful as later on, because
Yeah.
teaching for the first time is quite, you need to get your grips with it. You need to write the material, you need to test it, a bit like a comedian. You write your stuff and then you need to test it in front of a live audience,
Mhm.
and kind of refine as you go along. So there was a lot of that, which is a really interesting process as well. Um, and then again, going back to very basic stuff, I had to go back into JavaScript and I had to go back into right. Okay, how does this stuff work, and what's the sort of underlying engine behind the language and all of that. So learn so much as well in the
Mm.
process of doing that.
It's amazing how much you are forced to learn yourself when you're expected to explain even the most simple concept to someone, right?
Yeah. you need to know exactly what you need to know. I think that's quite a common thing for teachers, but you need to know 150% to be able to
Mm,
teach that 100%.
mm, mm,
You need to know so much more. But yeah, yeah, and it's very humbling as well because at some point you go, okay, there's also a lot I don't understand. So one, you need to catch up, or there's a lot of stuff that needs to go into part two or part three or whatnot because it's completely outside the scope of
mm.
this course. But yeah, very very interesting this the teaching stuff.
I mean, it's. I think you said it there. It's a very impactful course, and it tends to be experienced developers who are kind of looking to learn a little bit more or reinforce fundamentals. That's what it was for me anyway. And it has great word of mouth, or like if they had like an NPS score, it'd be like a 9 or a 10. So how do you decide what to teach then? How do you iterate and get to the point that it's at now, or it was in its prime?
Well, I think the idea as well was when I started that course. Again, I don't have the dates in front of me, but one was that 7 years ago, maybe something along those
Mm,
lines. It A lot of it stemmed from my own experience, having used stuff like jQuery, for example, which 10 years ago jQuery was everywhere. We were starting to switch to React, but it wasn't. Well, some people were already into React, but the main developer network or sort of universe was very much still using jQuery. And the problem with jQuery is that you can only get so high, and at some point, if you've only used jQuery and if you've never actually used basic JavaScript stuff, and even like selectors and DOM selectors and sort of native selectors and stuff like that, you get stuck quite quickly and you get
mm,
trapped into a sort of jQuery sort of mindset. Um, and I think the course kind of stemmed partly from that, trying to say, okay, well, there's a lot of people that are still using jQuery or that are heavily into that, and at some point are hitting a bit of a brick wall because they want to go further than that, but they find it quite difficult because they've never had that sort of very basic JavaScript sort of either discovery phase or learning phase. So I think the idea was kind of that, and at the time as well, jQuery was definitely on its way down, and so you had more and more people like that who were trying to switch to React or trying to switch to native JavaScript or trying to switch to Angular or and we're kind of hitting brick wall. So I think a lot of it came from that, and so the idea of the course is like, okay, well, you know, you're a web developer, you're a front end dev, you know HTML and CSS quite well. You're trying to do the idea was you're trying to do very basic stuff like accordion, hiding and showing, clicking, a bit of Ajax and stuff like that. How do you get that to work in native JavaScript? How do you do that without relying on jQuery? And so from then on, building the course was fairly straightforward because the very beginning is variables, functions, objects, arrays. Start with that. That takes a couple of sessions. Then spend a lot of time on DOM selection. Crow selector or get element by ID. How do you traverse the DOM? How do you navigate all of that? And then after that, how do you manipulate the DOM if you need to add or remove stuff? Um, and then after that, events, obviously, because that's the sort of the magic really where things really come together. um, and there's almost a natural progression to learning this stuff. And
yeah,
then
yeah.
and then after that, you can add like Ajax, and you can add a little bit of jQuery because it's worth mentioning, and you can add a bit of React if you've got time. But there's almost a very, I don't know, very natural progression to that. And again, as I was saying, a lot of that is sort of testing it out and then refining as you go along and as you teach the stuff.
That's brilliant. And I mean, I think those are, the really core strengths of the course, and that's why it helps so many people because, things like jQuery and React, which you mentioned, are like libraries, or frameworks that sit on top of the core language. And it's a kind of Ruby on Rails syndrome. You get
Yeah.
amazing Ruby on Rails developers who are great at, using what Rails provides you, but then they don't understand the underlying core Ruby language so well, which is why this was like great. Because also, like, it's great to take like a little break out of your work, something you can justify to your employer, to let you go back and relearn some of those core fundamentals. It's not sexy or exciting or new or adventurous, but it's like the language that we need to understand, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you say it's not sexy. I find it quite sexy. I find variable declaration function. if you go back to the basic JavaScript stuff, there's a lot to say about functions. Like there's,
Oh yeah, yeah,
even the basic stuff that a lot of people miss, like name functions, expressions, and anonymous functions and stuff. If you, I mean, this is quite a basic example, but you can really dig down and the whole nomenclature and the whole naming and all of that. There's a lot of nuggets that you can find if you really explore the docs. And
yes,
obviously
yes,
MDN, for example, is quite a good one. But you really find some stuff, even as an experienced developer, that are just quite sexy. I find, but yeah, that
yeah.
might be just me.
You have taught quite a lot of London's developers, or had an impact directly or indirectly. What have you learned teaching them or teaching us?
A lot, a lot. So just before we go into that, I think the audience as well was quite eclectic. I've had a lot of. I think you're saying, yeah, there was a lot. There's a lot of developers. I think I found a lot of front end devs who were quite comfortable with JavaScript and HTML, CSS, and quite comfortable with jQuery, but then wanted to get that sort of JavaScript notion. I've had designers quite a bit. I've had marketing people, who were using quite a lot of Google GA and stuff like that, who wanted to know a little bit more how that stuff works. So I've had a wide range of people, but yeah, a lot of developers mainly. Um, how have they impacted me? Well, again, it's quite humbling because, to start with, a lot of the people that you teach are smarter than you. Even though they might not be at the same level, a lot of those guys are very, very smart and pick things up very quickly, and a lot quicker than I could. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the developers that I've taught have gone beyond my level now, and are doing much better stuff than I am, and much. So there's that, and I think like we were saying, teaching really helps, like personally as well. It's quite it helps communication. It kind of gets your head quite cleared. When you then speak in like public and stuff like that. So you learn that. Um, what have I learned from the audience? Yeah, I think a sort of humbling sort of attitude. I think towards other developers as well, and sort of and the idea that people come from different backgrounds as well. So you've got basically the developer sort of network or group is quite varied. You've got designers, you've got people who started as designers who are now front end. You've got front end who go back to back end, who want to go full stack, or back end who want to go full stack. You get a bit of everything. So it's quite interesting, the diversity of people.
That's great. And I think you're far too humble. And we're gonna discuss tech skills a little bit later
Yeah.
on. But I mean, I've coded with you. You understand everything. You have. I think it's more important to have like a bigger picture, sort of understanding and knowledge of what's going on.
Yeah, what I think after a bit you kind of do, after about 15 years when you've seen, I think, I've had a bit of experience in different size companies because, the before my very first gig, sort of back in Paris when I started, was a webmaster. So it was very much e-commerce website, sort of very HTML, CSS heavy. And then I went for an agency, which was, agencies are quite fast turnover, fast churning, building stuff, almost burnout. Um, just pushing stuff out the door, and then next project, etc. And then, which was quite a sizable agency, so the projects were quite big. Um, and then the university, which is working in house and working long term on a project, which is extremely interesting. I think instead of going work on a project for 6 months and then push it out, never work on it again. Working on something long term, which is completely different. In quite a sizable team, and then going to the train line, which was massive. Really process heavy, where things take a lot longer. Any single change takes weeks and weeks, if not months, to go into production. And then going back to a small startup, which there's lots of different aspects. And I've completely lost my train of thought.
Yeah, that's okay.
I
So
don't
have
know
I.
what you I can't remember what your question was.
But
See, if you let me ramble on, I will ramble on.
okay, that's okay. I don't remember either, but that's a great segue into CBM. So CBM's been around for a few years now. It was a startup. Then when we spent some time together there, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, it was a scale up. Now it's really just sort of a small to medium sized sort of successful company that's building itself up, right? Um, so, so I mean, I'm not sure exactly what to call it. It feels like, in our industry we've got to label things somehow. It's not a startup, it's not a scale up. What is it? Is it it's just a company?
Yeah, I don't know. We'll talk about it when we talk about job titles. I'm not a massive fan of putting labels on stuff. We're a company. We're a fintech essentially, and I think, like you're saying, we're sort of making our way. We're not really a startup anymore. We've got 50 people. We're pretty much self. What's the word? We're sort of cash flow positive, just barely.
That's great. Yeah,
Um, so
it's pretty
um,
lean. It's pretty
we're
compact.
still relying on. Sorry.
It's pretty lean and pretty compact, right? It has to be, right?
Yeah. We're very sort of focused. Uh, yeah, yeah. We're very. I mean, the team, like the front end team, for example, at the minute is just two of us. Um, and one of them is a contractor, and he's working 3 days a week, so it is very small. And at some point, when you joined, there was how many front end devs did we have? Five, was it?
Something like that. Yeah,
Yeah. So we go. Yeah, we're quite
yeah.
agile, I suppose, in a way, and adaptive and sort of responsive to the sort of business needs. But
Because
yeah, we are quite lean.
it's not a tech company. I mean, they're not there to sort of build engineers and a giant tech team. The devs are there to serve the business needs, right? And there's an equal back end team as well, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, we I think that's a good way to put it. The product is the sort of data that we have, and that's the core of the business. It's once we've got that data
Mm,
from the bank and we've sort of massaged it and sort of transformed it. It's how do we expose that? But that data is our core business model.
mm,
Which is an interesting one because you'd think we're building tools around that, but the tools are almost like you're saying serving the sort of business. But those tools are worth something in their own right as well. So it's almost also at some point will we be able to package those tools and then lend that to someone else or make that available
mm,
or sell that on its own to other companies or not. That's also an interesting direction that the company could take. I don't think that the directors want that, but there is that whole we're building tools. We're like any tech companies,
mm,
but
mm.
that's not those tools are only there to serve the sort of business needs.
From a technical point of view, engineering point of view, you have to be very flexible and very adaptable. And like you say, your team grows massively, then it shrinks massively, just depending on needs, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the classic example is we use a lot of high chart for charting, um, which was a decision that was made very early on, and it's kind of stuck because it's quite hard to move. But at some point, when you were there, we were thinking, do we need to switch to D3, which is obviously more powerful? How long is it going to take us? It's
Mm,
going to bring so much positivity and sort of things that we'll be able to do, but then it has a cost. But yeah, we
mm,
need that flexibility of being able to say, you know what, high chart doesn't cut the mustard anymore. We need something better. Is it going to happen? And sometimes you spend a bit of time investigating those solution, and whether you choose them or not, whether that happens or not, that's another story. But yeah, we need that flexibility of turning around. The same way that when I started, um, at CB, the product was built by a backend dev, and it was all jQuery, and it was using Hotjar. And so the first thing I did was, okay, well, we need to sort of normalize that, start introducing modules, start building partials and sort of breaking down our code. The second thing was we need to introduce React because it's 2017 or 19, whatever. We can't be using jQuery anymore that's just crazy. So but we need that flexibility of being able to say, let's ditch this and then replace with that. Let's ditch that and then
mm,
replace with this. The same way that tomorrow, I don't think React is probably there to sort of stay. But if we're still using Redux, for example, if at some point we kind of go, okay, well, we can't be using Redux anymore because it's a bit outdated, or I don't know. We need to be able to say use something else and then replace it, and then in a couple of months we need to be able to replace that. So yeah, we,
mm,
we need that flexibility, which obviously you get at a startup, which is quite easy because the sort of development to production life cycle can be a couple of days if we need. We've got
mm.
that sort of fast paced sort of deployment if we need. So yeah,
Yeah.
quite a lot of flexibility.
So my question for you is, what would you tell someone who's never worked at a startup or a small company like this, which can change quite a lot? And I want you to answer from 2 points of view, please. One, let's say a junior developer in the first or second role, that needs to grow, and maybe a more experienced developer, like maybe people who haven't worked in a small company or startup, like what do they need to know before they think this is something that they would want to consider?
Yeah, that is an interesting one. I think personally, I would say a lot of that is down to character as well, down to character and down to where are you in your sort of career and what are you looking for. Um, I think for a young developer, I'm probably going to play both sides here. I think there's probably some very good points because it moves really fast. You're not rigid. It's not as rigid, at least, into processes and stuff. And so what you do has an impact, and a lot of the time small startup, small company, the teams are going to be much smaller, so your role is going to be more important. You're joining the train line, there's 200 developers. As a young developer you're probably going to learn quite a lot, but your role isn't going to be as impactful as a small company like us where I've got a team of 3 people. If you join, whether you're junior or not, you're going to be put there. Your code is going to go into production fairly quick. So I think there's that stuff of you're going to learn a lot. You're going to be put on the spot, and I think and I think a lot of small companies do this as well. And I think we try to do this at Credit Benchmark. Whether you're a junior developer or senior developer, actually the sort of boundaries are kind of blurry. You're a developer and that's it. You're coding. You're part of the team. You're just as valuable as any other member of the team. You participate in processes. You have a say in how we do things. You have a say in the code. You have a say in coding standards, and your code makes it into production. So you basically become a full-fledged member, whether you're junior or not. To us, it doesn't really matter. Um, so I think as a junior, you need to be able to almost sort of take that on. Obviously, we don't let you fly. We don't push you out and kind of let you fly in, without nest, without sort of net or protection. But you sort of need to be able to take that on. And I think doing that, you learn so much. So I think if that's the kind of thing, and that's why I was saying it's down to character. If that's what you're looking for at that point, then go for it because you will learn a lot. Um, I suppose the other side is that it's the same thing. It's that attitude. Are you do you want to take on that maybe not stress, but do you want to take on that sort of the sort of pressure? Are you ready for that? And the whole character thing is, I think some people like being, or at least at some point in their career, they like being sort of a bit more nested and have a bit more boundaries and have a bit more, bigger company where you have more processes. You'll be mentored by a senior developer quite closely. Your code will be reviewed systematically. Having that sort of frame. And I think if that's what you're looking for, then finding that in a startup is going to be a little bit harder, and you might struggle a bit more. So if you need that sort of frame and that sort of I don't know what the word is, but that sort of protection, then yeah, you it is going to be a little bit harder. Um, which I think is a lot of that is common sense, really. It's not just development. I think you can say that about a lot of other roles in terms of smaller startup, bigger companies. Um, For senior devs, I think it's kind of the same. That is an interesting question. I've had. I think you've worked, Sanjay, for Money Supermarket, didn't you?
Compare the market. Yeah.
Compare the market, okay. Because I had a friend who started there recently, senior dev as well, and he was saying it's amazing because the processes are so comfortable. It's essentially, you come into the office, you do your job. It's really interesting. You don't have to worry about the sort of the shenanigans that go on in a startup, and you can just focus on your job. And I think again, as a senior developer, it's kind of what are you looking for? In a small company, you're going to be doing everything. You're going to be doing a bit of everything. You're going to have to take ownership. It's going to be quite stressful. Your sort of dev skills are going to be tested. Your yeah, your stuff is going to be live straight away without. You're going to be one of the main persons there, so people are going to be looking to you for answers and looking to you for sort of technical analysis and all of that. Whereas at a bigger company, again, you're going to have that sort of, I don't know, I wouldn't say cushy, but you're going to have a bit more comfort. So again, based on what people
Yeah.
are looking for, what is it at this point in your career that you're looking for, and sort of decide based on that. Um,
Mm.
that is kind of my take on it. Sort of large versus startup company.
I guess I think you sort of nailed it there. I mean, at these big companies, you can be like one small fish in a giant school of fish, and you just kind of have to move in the same direction, and you have a lot of protection and support around you. It's a lot safer, and you know where you're going. And there's lots of people to take care of all the other responsibilities. You just do your job. But the thing I really enjoyed about working at Credit Benchmark was like you only hired seniors at the time, and no one had a senior job title. Everyone's title was just developer or engineer or whatever, and you could just focus on your work. You're kind of allowed to just take ownership of something and be expected to sort of deliver it. And you're not. It's nice to also not have that. Oh, now I got to mentor juniors, or I got to do I got to be like a line manager, or I got to like get involved in like all these other activities with a big engineering culture. So it's quite nice in that sense from my point of view.
Yeah, yeah. That's quite true. I think. Well, in a way, we're focusing. We've got a product to deliver. We don't have time
Mm,
to sort of mess about with. I think job titles and who's who and
yeah,
who does
yeah.
what and stuff. Like you get hired for a job and then you just do it. And I think I don't know, small teams. I think it might just be part of the culture as well at the company. Where we're quite. I think a lot of the dev guys have been there for a while, and we saw the company grows and we saw the team grow as well, because initially it was, and we've gone through different iteration. At some point it was one big team, and at some point it was back end versus front end, and at some point it was sort of database versus middleware versus front end. And at some point, it was like, okay, well, we're too far apart. We need to go back into a single team because we are a single team. So we've gone through a lot of iteration of how that works as well, and I think it's just brought us quite closer, um, where we're just all working on the same product really, and that's just it. I think that like kind of comes down to that.
On the meaninglessness of job titles in such a small and compact and lean organization,
Okay, here
like
we go.
it's. I don't think it does you justice, Gilles. I mean, you're a celebrity. You can't have a job title front end developer. I think you need to invent something new. But
Well, the celebrity thing is despite me, and it is the very first time I hear of it today. So that is one thing. To Yeah, I don't know. I was hired. The other thing is interesting as well is that this company specifically is finance. How can I put this softly? The finance hasn't been known. I think that has changed the last few years, but isn't known for being the most innovative technically. Um, specifically when it comes to front end stuff. I've come from agencies where it was like you design cool stuff, you have UX, and like the university where UX was quite heavy, and stuff like that. And so that is slowly starting, and especially at CB. But a lot of the guys are from a financial background and don't really necessarily understand that sort of cool, edgy front end sort of UX sort of attitude. Um, and so and so I was hired as a front end dev, which I think at the time even the guys were like, what is a front end dev? What is that even? What are you doing? Oh yeah, you're building front end. Okay, using jQuery. Yeah. Okay. Is that even a developer? Yeah. Okay. Um, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but and so it was sort of like, okay, well, my title is almost developer. It just happens that I work on the front end product, with the other developers. And I think at some point I may have changed that to front end dev. I never changed it to senior dev or lead dev, because the team is so small as well. Like, you know, yeah,
but you were
and also,
effectively a lead developer when I was there.
yeah, yeah, because I think I've just sort of organically took that role on, because when I started, it was two of us, and the guy who'd been there, as I was saying, was a back end dev. Would build a sort of initial front end, um, and so it was two of us, and then he left, and so I kind of ended up the only front end dev with knowledge of the product, and the only one sort of capable to release features and put stuff live. And then we started hiring people, and
Mm,
so I think it just organically, I was just the oldest there, and I knew the product, and I knew exactly, and I had a good relation, and I still have a good relationship with the product team, and we work quite well, and we know exactly where we're trying to get to and how to get there, and so it's almost a natural sort of somebody needs to step up at some point and sort of take up that role, so it just almost happens just naturally.
mm.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I guess the moral of the story is don't read too much into job titles, right?
I think it is interesting at some point. I've the other day I was at a wedding a while ago, and I was there with one of my girlfriend's friends got married, and we get put at a table, and then we start talking about job, and then one of the guys says, "Oh, what you do with your?" I'm like, "I'm a front end dev," and then the guy says, I say, "Oh, what do you do?" And he's like, "I'm a software architect." And I'm like, yeah, okay, fair enough. Then we have a conversation with my girlfriend. Like, what? Why is a front end architect? And I'm like, well, he's just a front end dev. He just does the same thing as me. It's like, so why
Yeah,
does he call
yeah,
himself a
yeah.
software architect? And it's like, yeah, fair enough. I mean, software architect does convey that sort of. Well, I do more than just front end dev. I do more than HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I think about architectures and I think about how pieces fit together. So it is quite descriptive, and it does fit the job. But at the end of the day, you do front end really. And I think it's that. I think there is a place for job titles because it does help you with you know putting a label on what do you do on a day to day. Um, yeah. So I think there is a place for that. Probably bigger companies as well, where you have 200 developers. They can't all be front end devs. Like
Mm,
it just doesn't make sense. So you do
yeah,
need
yeah.
some kind of hierarchy.
It
Yeah.
also has an impact on career and career progression, and statistically, probably there'll be a little disparity in pay. Right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, probably. I've been extremely bad with that, where I don't sort of pay really attention to my CV and how it looks and how it doesn't look in job title. Like I really couldn't care less. Um, probably having a lead developer or software architect, I could probably call myself front end architect at this point. Might land me a better job after career benchmark. I'm not really that fussed, so I think
Well, not
sorry.
all of us are celebrities who doors fling open for Gilles.
Well, I wouldn't. Yeah, mate. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so look, for finally, I want to move on to your vulnerable side and talk a little bit about this is something that I talk about with virtually everyone, which is imposter syndrome. Um, Something that I mean, I guess I got a sort of sense of it, but I think when we first spoke about this a couple of months ago, you kind of opened up about your occasional feelings of imposter syndrome because of the growing distance sometimes from like various types of technical work. I mean, bring me up to speed. Help me out because it's nice for people to know that we're all human, and people, you know, a lot of people will be watching or listening to this, and probably look up to you, and it's encouraging to know that even people in really senior positions can be vulnerable and have imposter syndrome.
Yeah, well, definitely have it. I think I've had it for a while. We're looking at years. I think a lot of people do,
Mm,
and I think the best way to put it is with any skill, the more you learn, the more you realize that actually you don't know anything, and there is so much that you can learn, and that you will never know everything. Um, and I think imposter syndrome kind of stems from that. For one point, I think for me as well, which is something that maybe isn't often talked about, and that might just be me, but I think it also stems from salaries. And the sort of development at the minute, and specifically sort of web development, is the pays, at least in London, and I think in the US quite a lot, and a lot of France is the same. and I think to some degree, like a lot of countries, I think are very similar. So that this is probably a worldwide thing. The pay is to me feels so sort of distance from the job that we do, in a way, and
You're
it's
saying it's
almost
very high.
yeah, yeah. Sorry if that wasn't clear. They are very high, against other people. My girlfriend is marketing, and the pays aren't that. They're nowhere near as that. And you look at, I don't know, teachers, any other job, and it just happens. That's just the way it is. There's not a lot we could do. The tech industry has been booming for the last 20 years, and we need developers, and everything is moving online, and we need those sort of skills, and we're almost short on those people. So it's not necessarily a surprise, and that's just the way the market works. But I think to me, that's another reason where sometimes I kind of think, why are they paying me so much money? I'm only building websites, web products. Like the skills I have, yeah, I've picked up skills over the 15 years, but a plumber has picked up skills and he does a valuable work, any other skills. And it's kind of like, why are they paying me so much money? And I think that might just be me, but I think it doesn't often get talked about. And I think it does participate in that imposter syndrome. It's like, okay, because, I think the amount you get paid is one way that a company or society puts a worth on you. And so that's one way to say, well, you're really worth, this much, and we really value you. And so that imposter syndrome kind of comes in where you kind of think, okay, why am I worth this much? I'm only building some small stuff. Why am I valued like this? So I think it's that to me. So there's that whole sort of the money thing, and then the first point, which was, yeah, at some point as you get a bit older, you kind of realize that you don't know anything actually, and so
Yeah.
why I look at the skills that I have today, and I know React, and I know Redux, but it's like there are so many more things that so many more things that I could learn if I had the time or if I had the opportunity, and it's like I don't actually. So yeah, that imposter syndrome is very much there. And I think it's not necessarily bad to have. I think it puts you in check as well, making sure you don't sort of, I don't know, fly a little bit too high.
Mm,
I suppose.
well, so it's guilt. Is that what it is?
I think
Societal guilt.
I I think with me at least, I don't know if that resonates with other people who experience this, but I think with me, yeah, a little bit. There is a little bit of that, yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, look, I don't know what you're on, but whatever it is, 100K, 200K, whatever it is, I'm sure you're worth every penny.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I tell myself.
Yeah. I mean, they're
Yeah,
they're not, these are all like former corporate guys, right? They're not in the business of throwing money away, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. But then you compare yourself to, again, like other roles in even in the tech industry, like marketing people and sort of roles like that, which and product managers and etc. Yeah, and I can't help but feel, why am I, I'm not going to refuse it, but there is, I think I'm almost tempted to think sometimes, there is a bit of a disparity between our salaries, and at some point, is there going to be an adjustment where things are going to rebalance a bit? Um, I don't know. That might just be me trying to predict what
Well,
happened, but yeah.
I'm sure things will change. I think we're in a very fortunate little position in time in our history, right? Human history, where there's this giant need, this boom of demand of demand and not enough supply. But I think that's changing very rapidly, right? Coding is on everyone's lips now.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think I don't have a degree in development. I don't have a computer science degree. I think a lot of people my age are kind of the same and sort of drifted into development sort of organically. And I think that is changing fairly quickly. Universities are definitely starting to pick up some of that stuff, front end code and design and all of that, and web development is starting to be taught, and things like short courses like City are starting to bring that into the sort of higher education sector. So that is definitely changing. I think the next generation of developers are going to be people who've learned this stuff. Are going to be people who were born with an iPad and an iPhone and a computer, who were born with Zoom, who were born, coding and pretty much that, who learn that at university and probably even at school, learn that at university, and so they're going to be Sanjay. We're all beasts. They're going to be developers on another level from us.
Oh yeah. We'll be Tyrannosaurus Rexes, basically. They'll look at us and laugh. They'll put us in a
Yeah,
zoo, probably, won't they?
yeah. I look at my mom was quite fortunate. She's like late 60s, so she's quite young still. But she was telling me when she went to, was it uni or high school? They were using punch cards to program. That's how she
Mm.
learned to program. And it was like, I look at that and I go, yeah, okay, fine. Our kids are going to
Yeah.
do the same. It's like, I used to use a text editor to program, and our kids are going to be like, yeah, okay, granddad. That.
Yeah, sure. All right, nice one, Granddad. Yeah, you go back to your
Yeah, you go back to manual programming and manually typing in Visual Studio and TextMate. Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll look back on this in 10 years, I guess, and see how right we were.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Gilles. This has been a pleasure and really, really lovely to catch up with you as always. And thank you for the fabulous insight.
No, thank you for taking me, giving me the opportunity to ramble on a bit on a Saturday morning. It was
Mhm.
good. It was good to speak to you as well. We should definitely catch
Yeah.
up.
And look, before I let you go, do you have a joke of the show? Because remember, we used to do stand-up jokes.
Yeah. You know what, I think the day you left, a part of us died, at Credit Benchmark. And so we tried to do the jokes on our daily stand up. It just, you weren't there. It just wasn't the same. So that sort of tradition kind of died out. I did have something for you. I think, as I was mentioning earlier, I've just become a dad in January. And it's not really a joke that I have, but more of an observation. Which is stolen from Seinfeld, which is one of my favorite comedians. But he has a good way to put it, where he says, having a young kid it's like having a blender, except you don't have a top for it. That's what it is.
That's wonderful. That's such a
It
great
gets,
analogy.
it gets
It's
messy.
very accurate.
Yeah. Um, yeah.
And that's all, folks. More info, links, and everything else can be found on aheadintech.com. Thank you, and please subscribe.